with the attitude that I share, don't have to share it, is that the time that you're in right now, this moment, is perfect. The things that happened to you in the past, good, bad, indifferent, they shaped you, they shaped human history, and they matter. And the most important thing is to understand history. So, the bad stuff, you're not doomed to repeat. The neutral stuff, hey, you're kind of aware that it's there. Cool. And then the good stuff, try to replicate it. What's the saying? I always butcher it. Hard times make tough men. Tough men make good times. Good times make soft men. Soft men make tough times. And the cycle continues. This is a historically accurate, simplified explanation. Moving on to the next thing I want to talk about. The Epstein files. Fun times. Trying to think of a equivalent analogy. And some like, I don't know. This is such an insane event. This is such an insane piece of history that we really need to get to the bottom of. So, again, turns out voters are smarter than politicians give them credit for. It turns out voters pay more attention than politicians give them credit for. The current administration, the Trump administration, the and everything that comes with that, the strategists, the cabinet appointments, Trump himself, somebody or all of them or half of them or whatever thought that they could run successfully. They felt they had their finger on the pulse of the voter. That's why they won. That's why they won after losing in 2020. They had their finger on the pulse of the voter. And they identified the Epstein issue as being a symptom, the attitude that people have that are outraged about Epstein. It's a symptom. It's all connected to America's individual populist attitude and distrust for the powers that be, power structures, and individuals that are part of these corrupt power structures. So, Trump runs on revealing the Epstein files. Bunch of people that get appointed into his cabinet talk about the Epstein files. His vice president, J.D. Vance, the FBI director, Kash Patel, the other FBI director guy, I forget his title, Dan Bongino. And that's just a couple. Because these are the ones that all of a sudden, after saying that they were going to look into it, what's that other lady's name? I can't remember. I took some bad notes. The other lady who said, I have the files on my desk right now. The files are real. They're on my desk. They're going to be reviewed. Then they're going to all be released. And then they looked into them. Whatever happened, I like to look at it, obviously. Let's look into it very deeply for whatever reason. And I'll get into a couple popular theories and then what I think is happening. For whatever reason, they decided not to release the files. The files are not released. They haven't been completely dumped onto the internet for the entire world to see. There's multiple reasons why. But here are the popular theories, and I'll let you know which ones I happen to share. Number 1, they never had the files to begin with. Number 2, the files expose a lot of people currently in the Trump administration. Number 3, the files expose a lot of powerful people that are not in just the United States government, but in governments and corporations and small businesses and large businesses, actors, writers, painters. It exposes. The operation is so large that it exposes so many powerful people that if they all were to go to prison or if they all were to get exposed, chaos would ensue. I happen to believe there's a little bit of truth to all of these theories. But the theory that I go with the most is that it's very, very, very complex. And I just think truly, because if you think about it, so here's some facts to know about the Epstein files. So we know Epstein was real. Fact. We know that he had ties with and connections with powerful people in multiple governments. The United States, the UK, he was friends with, at one point, at least two presidents that we know of, Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, if you look at the flight logs, which there are a couple files of flight logs that you can actually find a podcast episode where I, on video, review the handwritten flight logs. And in there, it has the pilot's initials, the time, a little bit of description of who the person is, and then the initials, some initials in those details describing who the people are that are flying, the passengers on the plane. And the flight logs of some of these pilots put down, there's numerous, it's not always written out, it's usually initials, but there's numerous examples. You can find these, trust me. Trust me, bro, that's my source. If you look at these initials, there's a lot of examples of BC and PC. And I thought, wonder what that means. Not sure if it's been confirmed or not. Allegedly, BC stands for Bill Clinton, PC stands for President Clinton. Now, for the sake of fairness and integrity, Trump also was friends with Epstein at one point. The facts are, as we know it, that Trump and him were New York socialite billionaires and or millionaires. And when you're a billionaire and a millionaire, you're a part of such a small group of the world that you all kind of know each other. Doesn't mean you're all friends, but at one point they probably did business. That's just how it is. But when Trump found out, when Epstein started to be creepy at one of his clubs, this is the story that Trump tells, and this is, it's been corroborated, but believe what you want to believe. But when Epstein started to act creepy, Trump banned him from his club, or from all of his businesses, I think. He also came out and he started to say some weird stuff like, he tried to steal some girls away from me, including one girl who was a confirmed victim of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking ring. So that's a really strange, unsettling thing. Who knows what he meant? But the facts are, a lot of people associated with him, you can't confirm or not confirm whether or not every single person who knew him, who went to his island, who did business with him once 24 years ago, knew that he was doing what he was doing. Obviously, if you go to the island, there's a very high chance that you were aware of what was happening. But if you look at the island, it's a nice island. Again, rich socialites. They all hang out with each other. They go to the same parties. I'm not saying that every person who went to the island was taking part in the sex trafficking and the abuse of trafficking victims, young women and underage women. I'm not saying that. Of course, people who went there went there for nefarious, evil things, and they should be held accountable. But also, it could have just been that, because, some of the proposed lists, like the theorized lists, have people on there that, it may be that we just, if there's a famous person, a celebrity, we think we know him, but we don't actually know him, because they're just famous. They put on a facade, right? Eminem's on that list. Chris Tucker from Rush Hour's on these proposed lists. Will Ferrell, Stephen Colbert, people from all walks of life. They're not Republicans, they're not Democrats. Some of them, we don't know their opinions because they don't talk about politics. So I'm not saying that everybody who went, because I can't prove that. That'd be irresponsible for me to assume that everybody who went to the island was evil. Okay? So that's where you look at it at a case-by-case basis. Look at it with all the complexities and nuances of the Epstein files. This is my long-winded way of saying, you know who's doing that right now? The law. The law is reviewing the Epstein files. There are a ton of cases right now being litigated, so they cannot be published. All the files cannot be published because if it's currently in a criminal or civil case, I think in a criminal case actually, you can't share details publicly until the trial's over. And then some stuff just can never be revealed depending on settlements and court rulings, from what I understand. And then with civil cases, it's the same thing. If they settle, that's why they always say so-and-so sued so-and-so for something. They end up settling out of court. They're not allowed to by law. Or they can go to prison or pay a fine or both. They cannot share the details of this. So it's important to look at it from that perspective. Might sound like I'm running defense for Trump. I'm not. Because The approach was, hey, I'm going to talk about this on the campaign trail. Second I get in, I'm not going to release the files. Again, it's because sometimes you make promises that you don't understand are going to be really complicated to keep. So I trust that they're going to continue to look into the files. They're gonna start releasing the things that they can release legally and morally, because Kash Patel went on Joe Rogan's podcast and said, hey, I've seen the files. I've seen the videos. There's just so much. There's surveillance videos. There's this and that. They're all contradicting each other, so you don't know who's telling the truth or not. But Kash Patel was one of those people who really, really, really had a big platform focusing on the Epstein files. Dan Bongino, same thing. And then they got in, and for whatever reason, they flipped. They all flipped. It was like they were given a script. Not saying they were, allegedly. That's what it looks like, and I get why people think that way. I feel that way a bit, too. But this is my perspective, completely. For the people that matter the most, okay? President of the United States, I truly believe the President of the United States, Donald Trump, wants to release the files. Well, he definitely wants to now, especially after seeing the internal poll numbers that the Trump administration's running, the internal poll numbers of the Republican Party. Just, if you have your finger on the pulse of the American people, you notice when they're outraged. And the thing about the Epstein files, it is not a Republican versus Democrat issue. It is an American issue. It is a unique American issue that we have joined forces on. That not only terrifies the party that's in power now, but if you believe in the two-party system just being actually a uniparty system, which I happen to, that terrifies the powers that be. Oh my gosh, Americans are united and disgusted and outraged at the idea that this person could get away with this. And then what? He didn't just sex traffic. He sex trafficked to a bunch of powerful people, because Jeffrey Epstein, per the law, got arrested and put in prison, and then he may or may not have committed suicide in prison based off charges for sex trafficking. He was found guilty in the court of law. Sex trafficking means that there are girls, for those who don't know, there are people, humans, that were against their will moved from one place to another. The sex part, you guys get what I'm saying. I don't need to get into details because I can already feel myself getting pretty mad about it. The crime of sex trafficking actually explicitly states the existence of clients. And Americans are rightfully outraged at this. Not just Americans. People around the world are disgusted by this. When you find out that, there's a very high chance, or it's actually been proven because there's pictures of my leader, a leader from my country, someone that I know, someone that's powerful, this is completely alleged. This is just an example. So Coca-Cola, the CEO, what the heck? I love Coca-Cola. I'm not going to buy Coca-Cola anymore. How could the CEO do this thing? I have a daughter. I have a wife. I have a mother. What if it was them who got trafficked, right? That's why people are outraged. That's the common ground that we've found. So, whether he intended to keep his promise from the campaign trail, Donald Trump now, maybe it's complicated. Like I said, it is. We know it's complicated, but without a doubt, they have noticed and they've paid attention, and they're trying to kind of backtrack on the things that they said, the Trump administration, because they saw the outrage. And their plan, like they said, they should have said this to begin with. If it's just a messaging problem and they've always intended to release the files, that'd be great. But they should have explained it in a way that the American people could understand that was digestible. Hey, there are these files. Some of them are pending court cases. Kash Patel said we don't want to re-victimize the victims, but that's a what do you call it? On paper, that's nice and it's a noble thing, but there are a lot of victims, confirmed victims, either anonymously or coming out and speaking proudly about it. Doing something that is probably, I can't imagine how terrifying and challenging that could be for someone like Virginia Giuffre. She's probably the most notable or most recognizable named trafficking victim. And I believe she is dead. She had a few car accidents, and the details around her death are really suspicious. Pretty sure she explicitly stated, like, hey, they're trying to kill me, just letting you guys know. I'm not suicidal. They're trying to kill me. And they ended up succeeding, if that's the case. Not sure. Either way, the details, just out of sensitivity, the details they're murky at best. There are victims, either anonymous or not, that stated that responded to Kash Patel, and they said, no, screw that. I'm a victim. I want them to be named. I want them to be named. I want there to be justice. But the tricky part is, how is justice supposed to be administered? Through the eyes of the law. And this is the tough thing. This is where everything gets complicated, because everybody knows, as an adult, you need law. You understand this. You need rules people need to follow, and you need a way to enforce that. Countries across the world throughout history, right now as we speak, they all have different approaches to law enforcement. The United States tends to focus on not diagnosing the problem and trying to prevent it from happening in the future, aka rehabilitation. Just focus on enforcing the law. So we're going to go in, we're going to arrest this guy, we identify that they committed the crime, throw him in prison. Boom. For the most part, our system has just been doing that. Until recently, rehabilitation has, it's been it sparked some conversation, and for sure, I've seen America making improvements. Absolutely, it's made improvements. And I'm glad that they're continuing to try to make improvements, because, like I said, being the best is not a stagnant thing. You don't win the Super Bowl and then never try to improve again. You don't win the Super Bowl forever. You just win it for one season, 1 year at a time. So what I'm trying to get at is, regardless, I think we are going to get some files for whatever reason or not, but you have to understand, in the eyes of the law, there's a protocol around this. There's pending cases, and if one CEO exposes another CEO, so one CEO, the case is settled, or there never was a case, and they need to be tried. They need to be tried in the eyes of the law, and justice needs to come legally. You have to have faith in the rule of law and the legal system for us to have a country. Now, on the other side, does that mean that every single law is just and legal, just and ethical and moral? Absolutely not. There is one of the examples to me of one of the most immoral, unethical, unjust laws that we have in the United States is eminent domain. I truly believe, I don't think it should be dismantled, but I think that eminent domain should be changed. And here's how I would change it. Here's how I would improve it. If this was on the ballot in the midterms, or in a local election, or better yet, in the federal elections, I would absolutely vote yes for the following. Eminent domain, you keep it. The thing that changes, though, is that the market price, quote unquote, which everyone knows is unfair, government surveyor comes, the government decides what is market value, and then they pay you that market value, which is obviously going to be the cheapest possible that they could legally justify. They need to pay you, at the minimum, 300% of their fair market price. Because one, their fair market price is not fair. We all know this. Just look into examples of eminent domain, okay? Two, you cannot put a dollar value on intangible things. You can't put a dollar value on memories. The memories that you made at this house. So a house has been in the family for 150 years, okay? That's multiple generations. That's at least 3 to 4 to 5 generations. 3 to 5 generations in a 150-year span. All the memories that were made. The Christmases that you had at great-grandma and grandpa's house. And then their kids kept on the tradition of Christmas, Thanksgiving, sitting in the backyard and just enjoying each other's company. Maybe you buried a couple family pets in the backyard. You raised your kids. You cannot put a dollar value on these intangibles. So therefore, 300% market value. Because you're not just displacing someone and taking their property. You are displacing, and you're inconveniencing, and you're possibly taking away things that are not reflected in the market value of the house. So that's an example. That's just one example. People can think of lots of examples. That's why it's great to have discussions, to talk these things out. But if there is a law that is immoral, that is unethical, do everything that you can legally to change it. That is my 100% belief. Just look at all the examples of long fought battles that didn't involve violence, where positive change came from it. Okay? So my message to Americans, and I'm going to draw this parallel to the JFK files. So here's going to be the issue. So say, best case scenario, they just, every single file that they can drop without re-victimizing the victims, without causing the world to collapse because maybe the operation is that big that so many corporate leaders, board members, politicians, presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, whatever the title is, that the world collapses. That is totally possible. Then that is indicative of that actually is the scariest possibility, because that means that this guy who, from hearing testimony from people who have met him, I want to say one of the Weinstein brothers, Brett or Eric, not the producer, Hollywood rapist guy. I'm talking about the scientist. Either Brett or Eric Weinstein talked about on numerous podcasts about how they actually met Epstein, because Epstein was very active in the scientific community. He blackmailed a lot of scientific community people, a lot of scientists. So just from his perspective, his testimony, and a few people who have met Epstein, they said, you get to talk to him. After 10 minutes, you realize this guy is not a genius. He's not stupid, but he doesn't know what he's talking about with science. Or if it's an economist, he doesn't know what he's talking about with economy. He's just really good at, exposing people and blackmailing them with it. His house in New York City, his apartment in New York City, had cameras everywhere, and it recorded audio. So there's video that he definitely used to blackmail people. There's that story of there being a painting in his house of Bill Clinton, one of his many houses, of Bill Clinton in a dress. Like, what is that? That matters, right? That's unsettling. Seeing a male president, a president that a lot of people look at fondly, in a dress, that's strange. What's that about? Is that a real picture or is it a painting? If it's a painting, what the heck, So what I'm trying to say is, part of the problem with this is, in a perfect scenario, they release all the files that they can without re-victimizing people, without causing the world to collapse, okay? Do you think that Americans are going to be satisfied? I'll tell you what, the answer is no. We just saw it with the JFK files. So people wanted the JFK files to be dumped. They wanted to look through the tens of thousands of files, and they wanted the first file to just say, here's who killed JFK. But it's way more complicated than that. And that's the point. People don't understand that if you are able to kill the president of the United States in 1963, which at the time, America was still the most powerful nation in the world at that time, and more than 50 years later, we still are the most powerful nation. So if the most powerful nation's leader can be assassinated, and it can be hidden and covered up, and we don't find out who did it exactly, or we do find out who did it, but the story is clearly BS, clearly has fabrications, clearly information's being withheld, people are going to demand answers. And up until the internet came around, and it amplified our freedom of speech and our freedom, our basic God-given rights that we're born with as Americans and as humans, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or life, liberty, and property, depending on the philosopher that you think America was founded on, or one of the philosophers' attitudes, Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The internet came around and amplified all three of those. It could amplify it, or it could also hurt it. But freedom of speech was definitely amplified. Freedom of speech and everything that comes with it. So the ability to research things, look into things, have conversations where you discuss it, have experts on to talk about, hey, you're one of the most accurate shooters in the entire world per these criteria. So how possible, what's the probability of being able to hit a moving target like this, not once but twice at this angle, right? Just these are just general things with the JFK files that didn't make sense. So Trump signs an executive order that announces that they would release all of the files. There are only a little bit of redacted things in there, but for the most part, it showed, it kind of left us with more questions than answers. But basically, what we kind of already knew and were suspicious of was that it was very complex. There were multiple different groups, individuals, organizations, countries, crime families that wanted him dead. And it seems like a lot of them collaborated together to kill the president of the most powerful nation the world has ever seen, at least in written history. Can't forget about the history that we don't know. And that left people unsatisfied. Part of that might have been on purpose. That might have been, probably was the government's intent, right? They suppressed this information for so long, they hope that people forget. People don't forget because it's the president of the United States and we don't know who killed them. We don't know. And if we do know, we don't know why. The lone gunman theory doesn't make sense. It's very improbable. It's possible, but it's just very improbable. There's too many inconsistencies, too much withheld information, too many shady things that just weren't investigated deeply enough and explained to and rationalized logically to the American people. We have a right. We're American citizens. We live in a democracy, quote unquote. So my worry is that people are just never going to be satisfied. Because like I said, people expected there to just be the first file and tens of thousands of JFK files, which could have just been like, a lot of it was just really boring stuff.